The morning sun rose pale and cold over the limestone cliffs of the valley, spilling light into a world still gripped by the long ice age. The man stirred beneath a blanket of fur, his breath curling white in the frigid air. His name, if names could exist then, was not spoken, but his people called him something that meant stone hand, for his grip was strong and his blows precise when shaping tool. He sat up slowly, feeling the rough earth beneath him, the low crackle of embers near his feet. Around him, other shapes began to move. His mate, his younger brother, a child still half asleep in the cornered cave. Their shelter smelled of smoke and animal fat, a smell that meant life, warmth, and saffron. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, scattering snow across the frozen plain. Another day had begun, a day to hunt, to gather, to survive. There were no words for boredom or routine in this time. Life itself was enough, and each dawn meant another chance to stay alive. He crouched by the fire, feeding it with a handful of dry moss and thin twigs. The sparks caught, and for a moment, the shadows danced on the cave walls. Shadows shaped like mammoths, deer, and bears. The man's eyes followed them, as if remembering hunts long past. He reached for his stone-tipped spear, running his calloused fingers along the sharp edge. Every tool he owned was made by his own hands. Flakes of flint chipped with precision, bound to wooden shafts with sinew and tree resin. His world was one of pure necessity. Every object had purpose. There were no decorations, no luxuries, no wasted effort. Yet, in the quiet moments when the fire was steady and the tribe rested, there was a kind of peace in this simplicity. The man didn't know the word civilization, but he lived its earliest form, cooperation, memory, and skill passed through generations. His mate handed him a strip of dried meat. He chewed slowly, eyes on the horizon. The hunt would begin soon. The valley stretched wide before them, a frozen wilderness alive with sound and danger. The man walked to the front, his breath visible in the cold. Behind him followed two others, his brother and an older hunter missing half a finger. They moved quietly through the snow, senses alert to every scent and motion. Tracks appeared near the edge of the forest, the hoof prints of reindeer, deep and fresh. The man knelt, touching the marks, feeling the story they told. The herd was close, maybe half a day's walk. He signaled to the others with a grunt and a nod. Communication was primitive but efficient. Gestures, sounds, and eyes carried meaning. Their spears were ready, their minds focused. For Neanderthals, hunting was not sport but survival. Meat meant warmth, tools, and life for the entire clan. And so they followed the trail deeper into the white wilderness, driven by instinct older than words. By midday, the world seemed endless. Snowfields merging into gray sky, silence broken only by the crunch of footsteps. The hunters stopped near a stream frozen thick with ice. The man chipped away at the surface, gathering cold water into his hands. His body was thick, muscular, built for the cold. A heavy brow shadowed his deep-set eyes, and his nose was broad. All perfect adaptations for this harsh climate. Evolution had shaped him not for beauty, but endurance. His tribe's survival was written into their bones. Shorter limbs preserve heat, powerful muscles to swing stone tools, lungs made for thin air. Across the frozen landscape, nothing was wasted. Every feature had purpose, every motion meaning. The man glanced up, scanning the horizon. Something moved in the distance, dark shapes shifting across the snow. The herd, his pulse quickened, and silently, the hunters began their... They crept closer, each footstep measured. The reindeer grazed among patches of moss and low shrubs, unaware of the hunters hiding in the wind. The man's heart pounded. This was the moment that decided life or death for the tribe. He raised a spear, waiting for the signal. A bird's cry echoed overhead, the sound they used to coordinate attack. In a single motion, they charged. Spears flew. The air erupted in chaos. Animals scattering, snow flying, shouts echoing. One reindeer stumbled, pierced through the flank. The man rushed forward, his breath ragged, finishing the kill with precise thrust. Warm blood spilled into the snow. For a moment, everything was still. The men stood there, panting, their faces fierce yet calm. They had done what their kind had done for thousands of years. taken life to preserve their own. There was no celebration, no glory, only gratitude and the quiet understanding of balance. As the sun dipped low, the hunters dragged their prize back toward the cave. The journey was long and heavy, but the thought of fire and safety kept them moving. Smoke rose from the cliffs, a sign that others were alive and waiting. When they arrived, the tribe gathered, eyes wide with hunger and relief. The women and elders began to work, stripping meat, collecting bones, saving fat for lamps. The man watched as his mate carved the flesh with sharp flake, her hands skilled and sure. Their lives were bound by rhythm. Hunt, eat, rest, prepare, repeat. Yet beneath that simplicity, something deeper stirred. The beginnings of thought, of memory, of awareness. That night, when the meat sizzled on stone and the fire painted the cave walls in gold, the man looked into flames and wondered, not about tomorrow, but about what it all meant. The first spark of curiosity, a sign that his kind was changing. Winter tightened its grip. Days shortened. Nights stretched long and merciless. The man's world became smaller. The cave, the fire, the constant whisper of wind outside. Food was scarce, and every meal was measured. The tribe huddled close for warmth, bodies pressed together under furs. Sometimes wolves howled nearby, their calls echoing through the valley. The man kept his spear close, always ready. Yet despite the danger, there was a strange beauty to it. The frozen silence, the stars sharp and endless in the night sky. He didn't know it, but he lived in one of Earth's purest eras, before metal, before walls, before the noise of cities. His life was not easy, but it was real. Every heartbeat, every breath, every scar had purpose. He existed not as a dreamer, but as proof that life, even at its most primitive, had meaning. One morning, the world changed. The ice cracked on the river, and the first hint of thaw touched the air. The man stepped outside and felt the faint warmth of the returning sun. He squinted, watching meltwater run through the snow. Birds called, sounds he hadn't heard in months. His mate joined him, carrying their child. They stood together, silent, watching the valley breathe again. Life was returning, slowly, quietly. He didn't have the words for spring, but he understood it. The cycle, the renewal, the promise that the world, like his people, would endure. In his reflection on the water's surface, he saw a face both ancient and familiar, strong, scarred, thoughtful. A Neanderthal, yes, but also something more, a being on the edge of awareness, of evolution. The fire within him burned steady, waiting for the future to arrive. The thaw deepened, and with it came life. Flowers sprouting through cracks in the melting snow, insects buzzing near streams, and herds moving north once more. The man, older now, led fewer hunts. His limbs carried the stiffness of years, though his mind was sharp as ever. Younger hunters had taken his place at the front, but his words still carried weight. The tribe had grown, more children, more fires, more stories whispered at night. He had seen the valley change, the ice retreat, the forest creep forward again. Sometimes he felt a strange unease watching the trees, as if the world itself was shifting faster than he could understand. His mate's hair had turned pale with age, her hands slower, but her eyes still glowed when she smiled. The child they once carried was now a hunter, strong and quiet, with his father's gaze. When the man sat by the fire, sharpening stones or carving bones, he would glance at his son and feel something wordless, pride mixed with mystery. What did it mean to grow old in a world that never stopped moving? In those warmer years, the tribe learned to adapt. They discovered new hunting grounds where forests teemed with red deer and wild horses. They built better shelters, low stone walls covered with branches and hides, stronger than before. The man showed the younger ones how to use fire to harden wooden spear tips, how to store marrow in bone containers, and how to read the land. The tilt of the grass, the track of a hoof, the smell of water. Knowledge was survival, but it was also legacy. Every skill passed on was a way of saying we were here, and we endured. Yet as the land changed, so did the creatures that walked it. Were rumors of strangers, others like them, but not the same. Taller, thinner, with strange tools of bone and ivory. The man had never seen one, but their presence hung in the wind. He wondered if the world was large enough for both kinds, or if one would have to vanish so the other could remain. It happened one morning near the edge of the valley. The man's son returned from a hunt, breathless, eyes wide. He had seen them, the strangers, pale-skinned, with narrow faces and lighter hair. They carried long, curved spears and wore clothes sewn with bone needles. Their voices were softer, their movements quicker. The man listened in silence, his heavy brow furrowed. Change had come, and it had a face. In a dense twilight forest, filtered light glows through mist and leaves. The Neanderthal man crouches beside his son and fellow hunters, watching from behind tree trunks. Ahead, through flickering shadows, a small group of slender, pale-skinned strangers tend to fire, their ivory tools gleaming softly. Smoke curls upward, mingling with the scent of pine. Two species face one another across the wilderness, reflections of the same origin, divided by time yet bound by wonder. Days turned into weeks. The two groups circled each other, never meeting directly, but always aware. Sometimes, the man found their footprints near the stream. Once, he discovered a broken spear, lighter and smoother than any he had made. He studied it, marveling at its design. These others were clever, perhaps more clever than his own kind. Yet he sensed danger too. Intelligence could be as deadly as claws. When food grew scarce again, tensions rose. The man's tribe began to guard their territory more fiercely. He knew what hunger could do. It made beasts out of men. But something in him resisted the old instincts of war. He had seen enough of killing. The years had taught him that survival was not just strength. It was wisdom. Still, the future pressed close, and the old ways could not hold it back forever. One night, under a sky streaked with stars, the man dreamed. In his vision, fire filled the valley, not from lightning or battle, but from within the earth itself. He saw faces, his people, the strangers, all fading into smoke. When he awoke, sweat covered his body despite the cold. The dream haunted him. He walked outside, staring at the stars. They had always been there, constant and silent, but now they seemed a whisper of endings. The next day, while gathering wood, he found something that stopped him in his tracks, a small figurine carved from ivory, shaped like a human form. It was delicate, almost beautiful. The strangers had made it. He held it in his palm, feeling its smoothness, and for the first time, he understood that they were not only hunters, they were creators. A strange sadness settled over him. His kind had mastered the world through strength, but these new beings had something else, imagination. The years passed like the wind across the valley, unseen, unstoppable. The man grew frail. His once broad shoulders sagged. His hands trembled when he worked. But his mind remained clear, filled with the memory of all he had witnessed. The valley, once filled with the voices of his people, had grown quieter. Fewer fires burned at night. Some had left to follow the herds. Others never returned. Disease, hunger, cold. The old enemies had returned again. The man sat by the cave entrance, wrapped in furs, watching the horizon. He knew, somehow, that his kind was fading. But he did not feel despair. Life was a cycle. Everything changed. Everything returned. He thought of his son, his mate, the hunts, the seasons, the stars. He had lived well, and that was enough. The fire beside him flickered, small but steady, like the last heartbeat of a fading world. When the end came, it was quiet. The man lay beside the fire, eyes half open, breath shallow. The cave was warm, the air filled with smoke and the scent of earth. His son sat beside him, holding his hand, a gesture that spoke more than words could. Outside, the world continued, rivers flowing, birds calling, the wind carrying the promise of new life. In the distance, perhaps, the strangers thrived, their children learning, building, dreaming. The man's kind would not last, but their spirit, their courage, their endurance, their first spark of thought, would live on in those who came after. His eyes closed, and in that final moment, he saw not death but continuity. Fire passing from one hand to another, from Neanderthal to human, from ancient to modern. The valley would remember him, even if no one spoke his name. The first dawn of humanity had already begun.